Hello, I'm Carrie Pasquarello. I'm with Global Secure Resources. And today we are going to be talking about how to close the safety gap.
Carrie, I'm so excited to have you here. You help students all over the world in different countries. Before they travel, you teach them how to make sure their family's safe, how situational awareness, all these different things. Today, you're going to teach us some digital safety tips so families can be safe before they travel, while they travel. You say that you're going to help us close that safety gap with 5 strategies. Walk us through what is strategy number 1?
Right. Okay. So, really, our awareness program focuses on the key indicators to preventing victimization. And we focus on the 3 Ps, which is proactive, prepared, and protected. And these are all in place to really bring the families together and really be safe. So, in closing our safety gap, we're going to be starting with our communication plan. So, it's so critical for our parents and our students to get together and start talking. And these 5 strategies, which is the communication plan, by opening our communication plan, we're going to be able to insert awareness. And awareness is such an important aspect to keeping our kids safe.
Sure. So if you can be specific, like communication plan, how do we communicate better with students about that awareness?
Right. So we're going to first start off with opening our communication plan by talking with our kids. We want to make sure that we're starting off with questions. So when our kids are coming in, we want to make sure that we're asking open-ended questions. We want to be able to ask questions where they're not just saying yes or no. So by asking, what did you do today? What are you up to? Can you show me what you're looking at on your computer? Can
Mhm.
you tell me what book you're reading right now? You want to be able to open the communication so we're spending more time with direct communication with our children.
Okay, great. What's strategy number 2?
So awareness. So we want to bring in what's going on. So we want to talk about situational awareness. We want to talk about the baseline check. We want to bring in the 2 R's. 2 R's is called the risk and resource.
Hmm.
So as we're looking at awareness, we want to make sure that we're looking around our environment and checking out what are some of the dangers that might be in our environment and what are some of the resources we can reach to really fast in order to get ourselves to safety.
Yeah. And then walk us through tip number 3.
Tip number 3 is talking about values and boundaries. This is one of the most critical things that parents can engage children with because oftentimes boundaries are invisible unless we're talking about them. So when we look at our values, we want to ask our kids, what are 3 really important values in your life? For instance, when I'm talking with students in our values and boundaries class, I'll talk about my values, and they are the 3 F's, which is family, faith, and finance. So
Mhm.
everything that I do has to go into one of those categories. And by identifying your values, then you can go in and set your boundaries. And one of the really important things to tell our kids about boundaries is once they're set, we can move our boundaries at any time in our life. But it's really important to create our boundaries and talk about our boundaries with others. Because once again, like I said, they're invisible. And if they're invisible, how is anybody going to know if they're crossing our boundary or not? So values and boundaries, really a great place to start with our kids as well.
I like that you're encouraging families to dialogue about this because if we don't talk with our kids about it, then other people will want to talk with them about it. And if you don't describe what's good and bad before your kids approach it, they won't know how to exactly what you're saying, how to know we shouldn't do this or what their response should be. So that's terrific. What is your 4th strategy?
So we're looking for red flags. And the red flags actually goes into the 5th as well. So we got red flags and we have intuition, right? So red flags, especially as we're talking about online safety, we want to make sure that we're identifying red flags, including what somebody might be asking us online, what predators might be engaging with us. So they might ask questions like, are you alone? Maybe a red flag would be, I'll hurt your family if you don't, and insert whatever. Also, they might say, oh, you're so mature, right? Or your parents don't know you like I know you. or don't tell anybody. These are huge red flags. And this is why it's so critical for us to be able to tell our kids about the red flags, because that's the only way they're going to be able to prevent and protect themselves.
Yeah.
Now we go into the last one, which is intuition. And this is such a critical thing to teach our kids about our intuition. Now, this is something that we feel, right? So it might be something really weird that's happening, or it just doesn't feel right. And there's no actual concrete evidence that we can produce, but it's an internal feeling, right? And so when you get a red flag or an intuition, this is where we want our kids to be able to stop, come to us, and talk to us, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, agreed 100%, especially on that dialogue. So let's just review this here real quick as well. The first one was a communications plan, open-ended questions. I like being tactical and practical for our audience. Number 2 is awareness. What are the risks and the resources we have available to us? Number 3 were the values and boundaries, right? Your values being family, faith, and finance. I love those 3 Fs. That's great. And number 4 is, what are the red flags? Right. And some people would call that grooming as well, right? So where you're saying someone is speaking to your daughter and threatening, or saying you're beautiful, nobody sees you like I see you, absolutely grooming, right? Scary, scary. I'm so glad you're encouraging people to talk to their students about that before they see it. And then last is intuition. Listen to your gut. If you don't feel comfortable, come and talk to us, right? Do you have any examples of how this might have worked? Leave student names out, but do you have any students that have either used this or incidents that have happened that are specific that maybe our audience could listen to and learn from?
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I will add as well, once you get that communication plan in place and you're talking about all these things, then you can slip into actually talking about inappropriate content, about bullying, about criminals, predators, how they use force, fraud, and coercion, right, in the grooming process. And so if I have to look back at some of the cases, really, we can look at a case right here in Boston where we had a criminal contact a boy here in Boston on Facebook, and he used that tactic of, if you don't meet me, I'm going to come and hurt your family. And unfortunately, the boy had never heard that this is a red flag to be aware of, and he thought he was protecting his family. He went and met the perpetrator, the predator. And afterwards, after he was unfortunately victimized, he came home and he told his mother. They went to the Boston police. What happened was an investigation. They ended up finding the person. He was a level 3 sex offender. And from that, they found other victims. Absolutely horrifying. And this is why it's so critical for us to have this dialogue with our children, because the predators in this world don't want us to have these conversations. They want us to be embarrassed to talk about sexual assault, gender violence, online sexual activity, right? They want us to be embarrassed to talk with our children so they can talk with our children. That is where we're going to foil them.
Carrie, you hit it on the head. In a lot of our presentations, we say, hey, the predators don't want you to have this dialogue. They don't want you to know about these tips. They want you to think the way you're currently thinking, unfortunately. And one of the other things that's really important is a lot of parents will say, Carrie, and I want to get your feedback on this. I'm going to have an open-ended question. What do you say to the parents that say, you know what, my student is 11, they're not online yet. I'll wait until I'm ready for them to be online to have this discussion about situational awareness, red flags, and all this other stuff?
Right. Okay. I love that question, Josh. And I love it because that is exactly when we want to have our dialogue with our children. We want to get them in the habit of talking with us. We want to get them in the habit of identifying red flags, intuition, all these important safety issues, because really what it comes down to is personal safety. You have to know the risk to avoid the risk, and you have to have it all in place before any risks happen. So that is exactly when we want to talk with our families, right? Before they give that first cell phone.
If I were to describe you, I'd describe you as somebody that's encouraging parents to discover this stuff and dialogue about it early and often, right? And you're basically saying before that, and you used to, and you will someday again, pre-COVID, you were helping people overseas when you lived in Thailand for several years, helping international travelers. Many of our listeners need to know that you have an amazing extensive background overseas for several years, helping people to navigate to different countries with physical safety and awareness, right? And now you're doing a lot of that same thing with dialogue that their kids could interact online with other people. But it's so important, any of our listeners right now, and I know our listeners are a little bit ahead of the game because they're listening to this, but if you think at any time, oh, I will wait until I'm ready. Predators love that. They want you to do that. They are begging for you to wait until you're ready because then they can slip in there. And here, let me tell everybody who's listening to this right now what could happen. Your kids go over to their friend's house, right? One of their friends have parents who have an extra phone in the kitchen drawer because they don't use that iPhone 8, or I have an 8, and I've been made fun of lately by the staff at the office, but they have an extra iPhone 8 when the kids got an iPhone 12 or 27, whatever's out right now. But they use that extra phone. They go, hey, and they speak to your son or daughter. Would you like your own Snapchat account? You can use our extra phone to download it and use it while you're over here. Well, if you haven't talked to your kid and you don't have a social media agreement about what is good and what is bad, how does your kid know having a Snapchat is bad? They don't. So if you don't talk to them about that and use some of these tips that Carrie's talking about, then all of a sudden your kid isn't doing anything wrong because you have not discussed the threats, the issues. You haven't started that dialogue. You've said, I'll wait until I'm ready. Well, your kid is already ready to have a device at someone else's house that you might not know about. Carrie, where am I wrong? Set me straight.
Prevention. This is where it's at, right? So we talk about the three P's: proactive, protected, right? I mean, there's just so much into what we really want to do with keeping our kids safe. And if I have to talk about another, story about being proactive, prepared, and protected, it would be when we were overseas and I sent my daughter on another study abroad. We've done a lot of time. We spent 12 years overseas, and she was getting ready to go off on a program. And we talked about, if anybody ever knocked on your door, what do? We got to be proactive. We got to be thinking what the criminals do. So we said, if anybody knocks on your hotel door, you always confirm with the front desk. And sure enough, there she was in Egypt, a high school student. Somebody knocked on her door saying that they were there to fix her air conditioner. But she had that strategy. That proactive strategy. She called the front desk and they said, we didn't send anybody. Right there, she foiled the criminal.
Wow.
She eliminated his entrance to her room. And I literally can say that saved her life. That still chills me to this day. And so once again, being proactive before any type of criminal elements enter your life is where it's at. And that's why I'm so passionate. And I know you are as well.
Yeah, that's a great story, Carrie. For all of our listeners right now, that story's, you're probably thinking, wait, I'm not in Egypt. My kid is they go to school and they want to be on this TikTok thing. We get it. But please, if I were to quote NBC, they said, wherever large amounts of people are at online, that's where predators hang out. Wherever large groups of people are online, that's where the bad people go to just talk with your kids, to chat with them, to coerce them into sending inappropriate photos. The threat isn't just physical, it's also mental and emotional. And we need to know that mental health is very important right now, as people are saying, hey, I'm going to victimize you by forcing your daughter or your son to send me inappropriate photos and so on.
Right, exactly. And I think when we go back to even the examples, I was on a consultation with a parent and a student, and I always know about sexting or students sending nudes. And I've heard, sometimes those numbers at a school could be in the 70% range. And so as I was talking with this father and daughter, I just threw that out. And I said, I know some schools, they have very high numbers of this. What is it at your school? Is it about 50%? Is it 70? And she was really shocked at that question, right? Because of course she, she's never talked about these types of issues in front of her father. But this is why it's so amazing to just open that door and start talking about it. And she said, yeah, it's probably over 50% of the students are sending each other nudes. And you know what? That is where your values and boundaries are so important to have set. They can't be invisible, and you got to stick with them, right? And so this was such a great way to engage the father and the daughter on such an important, critical conversation. And she was able to think about how to help a friend if they did send out some inappropriate pictures and what to do. So that is just really important, giving them the strategies and tools and techniques to really stay safe. And like I said, that story about Egypt, that was the cold call technique. It's the same thing predators are using online. They're just knocking on your door and it's inside your child's bedroom.
Yeah, that's 100%. It's very, and it's also a numbers game for them. They're going to knock on, if parents, if you're ever saying, oh, but we're not important, we're not millionaires, we're not this, we're not, I don't have to have secure passwords for this reason. That's exactly what they want you to say. Or my kid isn't online yet. They're not on social media. They're begging for it, but they're not. That's exactly what they want you to think, is that you'll be ready. You'll be ahead of the opportunist, the predator, the person who is trying to take advantage of your child. So please
Right.
consider this warning.
Yeah, and I really like the way that you've talked about in your books about how important it is for your career, right? Because
Yeah.
that just comes right into being proactive for your future. And I know myself and my husband, we both have had to fill out the SF-86, which is the forms to get the investigation going towards you getting your clearances, right? And
Mhm.
so you have to make sure that your digital life is pristine. You have to understand that everything you've done in the past will come up again. And that was one of the strategies that I use teaching my children. I have 3 children. And so when they were very young, I would show them our SF-86 forms and saying, you know what, these are the questions they're going to ask. If you want to have a job in intelligence or with the federal government and the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Justice, if you want to work at Boeing or GE, or some of these other big companies and at high level, you need to make sure what you're putting online is going to help later. And I think parents don't understand the critical questions that and training that they need to give their kid when they hand over a iPhone as some type of smartphone, right? Because all of that can be taken away. If you have blackmailing that can be done to you, you might not be able to get a clearance. That's limiting your children in the future.
One quick story, Carrie. A lot of parents, because I've spoken to 250,000 people over the last few years in an audience, but pre-COVID, and a lot of parents, I get inside their head. Part of what we do is making sure we understand where you're at, but this is where you need to go slowly to protect your babies, your children, your family, your future. And one of the biggest things sometimes for parents to make sure their kids are safe is, okay, I'll be all right, but they often don't know how very important those Google results are. And they'll think, oh, I'm not online, or my kid isn't online. All those people are other people, those people who got arrested and everything else. One thing I want to tell people right now is, if there's a lot of confusion about it could be your daughter or your son and those people who are arrested, then it doesn't bring clarity. And I'm all about the 3 Ps, the 2 Cs. We have all these different things: light, bright, and polite. I'm a lot like you, Carrie. We make things rhyme and easy to remember. Does it bring confusion or clarity over who your son or daughter is? Clarity looks a little bit like this. It's got their website up first. It shows about their portfolios, projects, public service on that website. It's got a real Instagram, a real Twitter, and all these different things that can put the best foot forward, or maybe a LinkedIn or something else. Now, one thing you should also note, there are stories of people, and I have countless, and I could go into great detail. We don't have enough time here, but there are stories about somebody, maybe it's your son or daughter, who gets this great dream job, but the person who made a mistake in that company, who got fired and your student replaced, gets very bitter and does a ton of research and finds a tweet or a post from 8 years ago that your son or daughter did in high school or middle school. And they publicize that and bring it up to the front, and it's all over the newspaper. And your son or daughter loses their job on the first day of their new career. And it absolutely devastates them, sets them back 3 years. It's terrible. So it's not just, is an employer going to see it? It's also, could someone who's bitter online pull that stuff up from years and years ago? And they spend hours going through past tweets and stuff like that. It's devastating, and it's something that happens all the time.
Absolutely, it does.
Carrie, I want to thank you for being here today. Carrie, what's some last word? What if I give you last word, what would you say to
Yeah.
parents who are just like, yeah, I'll get to this when I get to it?
Yeah, I would say if we're really going to make a difference and reduce victimization by improving communication, that's what we really need to focus on. Improving communication and focusing on personal values and boundaries, because online crimes against children are the fastest growing form of sexual exploitation. But It's the most preventable. So, and lastly, please set up blackout periods for you and your children, because that time together is going to be priceless and precious. And remember, also, it can happen to anybody. Predators are experts at luring children. So we want to fight back with awareness and the 3 Ps: proactive, prepared, and protected. So thank you so much, Josh, for having me on today.
This is great. Thank you, Carrie. To everybody listening right now, if you've enjoyed this, please rate, subscribe, and review so we can help more parents just like you. Remember to click the links below. You can learn more about Carrie's organization and what she does. You can also learn more about our VIP program to make you a very informed parent, where we have 30 courses that teach you the ins and outs of every single app that your kids will come in contact with, to make sure you are an expert on privacy settings, on how to shine online, and everything in between. We also have the Student Branding Academy, building out a website for your students so they can shine online, not just in middle school, not just in high school, but in college and beyond. And it ensures that your kid has wonderful Google results so that you can protect them from the internet. We also have other programs. If you're an educator, you can talk to Sally in our company all about how to bring our anti-bullying technology to your school and everything else: threat awareness, early detection of bad things that are happening on campus. We've got it all at smartsocial.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast or watching. We hope that you will join our newsletter to learn more about how we keep kids safe on social media so they can someday shine online. I'm Josh Oakes with smartsocial.com. Thank you, Carrie, for your time today. We'll see all of you on the next episode. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks again.